Okay. I think, in honor people that work here on time, we are going to get started. We have 87 people right now. This is so exciting. Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone to part 2, Justice, Giving, and Politics. My name is Sara Lomelin. I am the Executive Director of Philanthropy Together, and we're extremely thankful to have these inspiring Giving Circle leaders today to be part of today's event. In this part 2 of this series, we're going to continue what we started last month. So last month, we had a grounding conversation with leaders across movements to discuss why social justice is powerful and necessary. Today, our speakers will further explore this relationship between giving circles and social justice. Before we jump in, just a few housekeeping items. Please know that today's session is being recorded. We will send a link out to jump from the webinar portion to go into the breakout rooms later. So that way we have the recording of the webinar, but then you will be in breakout rooms sharing with each other, and though that part is not going to be recorded. So to turn on, you will be clicking, on the Zoom afterwards. Also, we have closed captioning available. If you want to turn that on, you can click on the CC button in your Zoom dashboard at the bottom of your screen. Another housekeeping item, super important, people. Thank you for those of you that have already filled out the survey, but we want to invite Giving Circle leaders to complete our social justice landscaping survey. LiJia, today's moderator, she's going to share more about on the social justice Giving Circle project, but I like to remind Giving Circles of this opportunity to help us understand the work of your Giving Circle in relation to today's social justice movements. Philanthropy Together as an organization was born out of research about the whole collective giving field. So the social justice Giving Circle field has never been studied, and we're very excited to see what real Giving Circles have to share about their social justice journeys, their values, their practices, and how that can inform future programming. So please take some time to do that. Today's event, again, just to remind you, is co-hosted by Philanthropy Together and the Social Justice Giving Circle Project. Philanthropy Together is a global initiative to diversify and democratize philanthropy by starting more giving circles and helping the existing ones thrive. And our role in this growing movement is to scale, strengthen, and sustain the collective giving field. So part of our work is to help change makers like you join and start giving circles where like-minded individuals pull their dollars and give collectively to issues that they care about. So take a look at the chat. I mean, as we're just announced Launchpad for You this morning, our spring cohort. We're already having tons of interest forms there. And we will train community leaders in 5 sessions to start their own giving circle. With that, I'm going to pass it to LiJia Gong, a member of the Radfund Giving Circle in New York City and leader of the Social Justice Giving Circle project, along with Mario Lugay, Seiji Carpenter, and Joella Saro Berman. She's going to share more about this project. Hi, LiJia.
Thanks so much, Sara. Hello, everybody. We're so excited to have you here, and we're so excited about the panel and also the breakout groups thereafter, because I think really we're here to explore and learn with all of you. So the Social Justice Giving Circle project has really come together to, exactly as Sara said, to explore the relationship between giving circles and today's social justice movements, both how that relationship currently exists or doesn't, and what's possible in the future. We're really so thrilled to be working with Philanthropy Together, and so grateful for the incredible work that they're doing in this field. As part of this Social Justice Giving Circle project, we are asking a lot of questions and engaging social justice organizers, many of whom, if you attended the first event, spoke with us then Giving Circle's leaders, like some of the people who we're talking to today, and practitioners and more. And throughout the past few months, we have met virtually with folks we admire and heard from them about how they understand the relationships between giving, social justice, and politics. And I wanted, just because we really do see these two events as two parts of a whole, wanted just to talk a little bit about some of the themes that came up from the first event, just in case you didn't do your homework or weren't able to make it to the first one. So one of the first questions that Lumumba, one of the speakers, asked was, what can we do together that we cannot do apart? You really said it so beautifully. We're all mutually bound together. And thinking about giving, not from a point of charity, but from that point that we are all mutually bound together. And we asked, like Sada said, a lot of the discussion was also about social justice movements and what are social movements? And movements are really, I think what Ju Hyung said was, movements are not just about improving the conditions under which people are living in, but also working towards liberation of all people. And movements are about love, and that love is not always immediate. It can be earned. So these are a little bit of themes and a little bit of quotes that I'm speaking directly from some of the incredible organizer speakers that we had. We also talked a little bit about the idea of political homes, which I think we'll reintroduce a little bit later today, as dedicated spaces within broader movements where folks can find refuge, where you can find your people who commit to having your back, and building a home that's about showing up for each other. And one of the points that Eric, who is a scholar in social movements, kind of talked about as an idea of, are giving circles more agile and versatile, and therefore might better sustain the fast-moving nascent parts of movements, was just a question that I think he was kind of hypothesizing and thinking about a little bit on the call. I will admit, if you guys go back and watch the record, use the word the insurrectionary aspects of movements many times, and I think that word has taken on a different meaning now. So, but I like to think of it of really just about kind of like the nascent, fast moving was kind of the words that I chose to summarize a little bit of what he was thinking. So I think that's what I took away a lot from the first event. And I know that many of the speakers will also reference that a little bit today. And I'm going to turn it over to Mario, who's a panelist and also a member, working together with this project, on this project with us, to kind of introduce everybody and do a great exercise to kind of, I think, share a little bit more about where we're coming from with all of this.
Awesome. Thank you, LiJia, for your leadership in all of this. So much of the way that I want to be in this world is with the expectation, whether real or not, that whoever I meet, I'll inevitably see again. So for those of you who we met last time and are back again, and the names that we're seeing in the chat, it's good that it didn't take too long for that to happen. And today we'll start the same way that we started last time. We'll do this in no small part because so much of the beauty of social justice and just goodness in this world can actually be found, despite all the talk of innovation, in repetition and practice about the ways we might kiss our children goodnight every night, how we might check in regularly with a grandparent, how we show up for our friends time and again. Our co-director at Justice Funders likes to have us do an exercise where we pick up a pen with our non-dominant hand and write again and again. Change takes practice. So we'll start again with the activity that we did. I'll ask all of you listening in, watching, to get in a comfortable position, maybe letting go of everything in your hands, closing your tabs, closing your eyes, and just start taking a few deep breaths. Now I invite you to remember back to a younger version of yourself, specifically one without the politics and perhaps values that you have today, a version of yourself much earlier in your civic and political journey. It might even be a version of yourself you would be a little embarrassed to have share their political views today. Now remember some of the people who came into your life and helped shape you and move you from that younger version of yourself to who you are today. They could be partners or professors, classmates or colleagues, friends or family members, organizers or mentors. Now think specifically of just one of these people, one who played a particularly significant role. Now open your eyes and find a pen, a piece of paper, and write down the words, comma, and then insert the name of the person you just thought of. Normally, this would be the moment where we would go into breakout rooms and where we would allow each of you to introduce yourselves to one another and to this space, leading with gratitude by going around and saying thank you, the person's name you just wrote down, and why you are thanking them as if they were in the room. This is a pretty large webinar, so in lieu of that, and given the size of this group, I'll instead go around and ask the speakers to each share their gratitude, beginning with LiJia from Radfund.
I knew Mario was going to put me on the spot, but it still always feels a little nerve-wracking, and I haven't done this before. Sarah, will you turn on your video? Because I want to thank you. And oh, sorry, Sarah, was it? Sana, I will also thank you, but I'm thinking of my old friend of Sarah David Heydemann, who's now a panelist. And I wanna thank you, Sarah, for helping me along my political journey. I think your fight and tenaciousness and all of the work that you've done to fight for workers has been such an inspiration to me. And now that I'm doing that work a little bit more myself, I just am always motivated by how true you are to yourself and how much you bring, how much you challenge all of us in the work that we do, both in Radfund and beyond.
Wonderful. Thank you, LiJia. That's a good segue to actually, I was going to move alphabetically, but it's a good segue to move to Sarah from Radfund.
I'm not just doing this because LiJia just for this, but I really wrote down on my paper, thank you, LiJia. So we can just keep the good vibes flowing. So I want to thank you, LiJia. You are not only the reason that Radfund exists, but you are someone who has always pushed me, not only in my political development, but in understanding how joy and creativity and fun can be important and essential elements of the way that I think about my politic. You said something a long time ago that has always stuck with me, which was about taking advantage of the flexibility and the plasticity in moments of change and moments of struggle. And it's such a beautiful concept. And I just go back to it again and again and really cherish the fact that in those moments of conflict and struggle, I can think about the opportunity for creativity. And that's really thanks to you. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up, I'll invite Marsha Morgan from Community Investment Network. Marsha. Oh,
Hi, thank you. So founded in 1913. Yes. So when we were founded, they were actually really struggling as they marched. And I believe I'm having issues with my Wi-Fi, so I apologize. However, despite being spat on, ridiculed, called names, they persevered. And with that, they enabled and created a legacy for thousands of other women for years to come to actually be able to understand the need to be involved politically. And so for those of you all who may not have been able to hear me, I was honoring and thanking the ladies of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. In 1913, they participated in the Women's Suffrage March. And that was at a time when they were ridiculed, spat on, that even though they needed to have the opportunity to vote equally, they were still not welcome, even though they were marching for the same equal rights. They knew women needed to be protected. They knew we needed to have a voice. They knew that we needed to have equal rights and equal say. And so even as we think of where we are today, and we lift up Latasha Brown, Stacey Abrams, DeWanna Thompson, so many other Black women who have done tremendous things to make sure we all have equal rights and still the ability to vote. I always think of these 22 women who really faced hardships to create a space for me and so many others.
Thank you, Marcia. That's beautiful. And next up, Sian from Giving Project Network.
Hey everybody, I'm Sian. I'm the co-director of the Giving Project Network, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to say because I was prepared to talk about Walter Rodney, who was kind of a revolutionary activist from Guyana, but I never met him. So when I was hearing your prompt today, I'm going to name somebody a little closer to home who actually I do know and who has definitely furthered my political journey, and that's Wendy Moore O'Neill. She's a community organizer, activist, cultural organizer in New Orleans, where I live. And one of the things that Wendy organizes is or pre-COVID was a community sing. So every month we would get together and learn freedom songs and sing. And it just was such a impactful space for me to practice using my voice, to be connected to freedom songs that people have been singing for centuries in this country. Wendy's now the co-director of Southerners on New Ground song, doing queer feminist organizing in the South. And just really, I think I led a couple weeks ago, led a song. I was raised thinking I couldn't sing or being told I was tone deaf, but a few weeks ago, led a group of about 90 something people on Zoom singing some songs, and had Wendy to thank for that. And so I think has really helped me in finding my voice and recognizing the connection to movements of the past and kind of bringing that spirit and culture into how I do my work today.
Thank you. And I hope to one day experience that. So for those of you who weren't here with us last time, we do this exercise for a few reasons that I'll share, particularly when introducing people to social justice. One, because one of the greatest dangers we face in this work is falling towards self-righteousness, to ever act as if we were born with the politics and values we have today, to use social justice as a weapon rather than as an invitation to people still early in their political journeys. This exercise serves as a reminder that we weren't born with our politics or values, by reminding us of a time before we might have had them. And that if we ever did act as if we were, we would be making the person we just thanked perhaps invisible. A second reason I like to do this exercise is because one of the things that most captivated me about community organizing and social justice movements was its concern for legacy as much as impact. Impact might be the laws you get passed, the resources you mobilize, the campaigns you win, but your legacy as an organizer is about whether or not in an exercise like this, 20 years from now, someone would be thanking you for your impact on them. Our legacy as organizers is tied to the personal transformation you allow others to have and the ways you allow this to transform you. Lastly, I wanted to bring this exercise here because so much about Giving Circles is about a focus on aggregation of people and of money. I hope this exercise primes us when thinking about the relationship between Giving Circles and social justice, that it's not just about aggregation, that the power and dynamism lies not just in the aggregation of a critical mass of individuals, but within that aggregation, how far those individuals have progressed on their respective individual and collective journeys in becoming, as Grace Lee Boggs said, more human humans. It's a difference between a congregation of parishioners that only come together over the holidays versus one whose members regularly attend services, building community and belonging and power along the way. To end this exercise, I now ask all of you who are listening in and watching that in the spirit of mutuality with the speakers who shared their gratitude, to type into the chat, thank you, and the name of the person you might have thought of earlier in this webinar. We're grateful that each of you are here with us today, and so we're also grateful for all the people that you're thanking now in the chat. And with that, I will pass it back to LiJia.
Thanks so much, Mario. Yeah, I know that the chats are going, but it's great to see everybody thanking folks who follow further them along on their journey. And hopefully maybe we'll get to dig into some of that in the breakout group a little bit. But I'm going to start the conversation with a big question, but we thought it was important to kind of think a little bit about what our vision is for social justice, and then think a little bit more about where collective giving and giving circles might fit into that. So starting with the big, and then working our way a little bit back, I think, from that. And so this question, which it's a big question, but I think we can also return to it a little bit later. For the panelists, especially for those who are working in giving circles or giving projects, is what is your radical vision for social justice? And I know this is a huge question, so but I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say. So Sian, why don't we have you start first, and then I'll turn it over to Marsha and then Sarah.
Okay, thanks. So I would say at the biggest picture, my radical vision for social justice is liberation. And by that, I mean being free from and healing from all forms of oppression. As a socialist, I believe that the economy is really central to that process. And so that means having an economy that puts people first, where work is organized for collective benefit, not for profit, where the fruits of the labor that people do are actually distributed equitably to the people who are doing the work, and where people are at the center of their own lives and deeply connected to each other, to themselves, to their bodies, and well organized. I think that, and then that the institutions and the culture within the society, that governments actually reinforce that collective liberation, that collective idea of nobody being oppressed, and that collectivity, right? And that society is set up for the social benefit of all people. So I think in this context of when we talk about the United States and we talk about the current state of racial capitalism in the world, we have a lot of healing to do from centuries and centuries of exploitation. There's a need for reparations for systemic theft and violence and harm that's been done. And I think that connection is key as we move in that direction. Anything that helps us get connected to each other, to ourselves, to our bodies, to our spirits, and to this greater purpose of our own humanity and being in that together.
Thank you for sharing that, Sian. For me, I don't really know if my vision is very radical, because I think that it should just be what exists. And so when I think of my vision for social justice, it means that everyone has access to a quality education. There are no people that are starving or hungry. People have the ability to thrive and to fulfill their wildest dreams and to show up in the way that allows them to be joyful and happy, and to be able to really be able to share and connect in community how they would like to. And so when I think of barriers to that, that is what kind of keeps us from that radical vision. And that's unfortunate, because a lot of times when people hear the term social justice, it can be a little offsetting and off-putting to them. But in its simplest and purest term, we're not talking about something that is unfair or oppressive. It really should be towards the greater good for all humanity, for everyone.
I want to echo what my co-panelists have said. I agree that we need both individual and collective liberation and healing, and that so much of the pain and the harm that people experience is a direct result of the ills of capitalism. And one key piece that I would add is that my vision of a just society also includes a direct accountability for people in power. We need to have the ability to hold those that we have chosen to lead us in accountable for their actions in a much more robust and transformative way than we have the ability to in our current system.
Thank you all so much. And yeah, I feel like there was a lot of resonance about thriving and joy, Marcia, which I feel a lot of resonance towards, because I think that's a lot of the reason why I do this work. It's not only because it's joyful to do it, but also to envision a world where there can be liberation and joy for all. So I think the next question that I have for you all is to tie a little bit of that social justice vision, which may or may not be radical, into the collective giving that you guys all do. And, you know, I would like to ask, how does collective giving further that vision? And then if you want to go into, you know, each of your respective giving circles or giving projects, you should feel free to go ahead. So why don't we start with Sarah, and then we can just go in reverse order, Sarah, Marcia, and then Sian.
Great, thanks, LiJia. So I'm from a giving circle called Radfund. We are a group that gives to New York City-based organizations focusing on social change that is based in organizing. And our model, I think, pushes us towards that vision of liberation that I described. So we're a cross-class organization, we're a cross-racial organization, and we can y'all hear me okay? And we give ourselves and encourage others to give 1% of their income and 0.1% of their wealth into a collective pot that then gets redistributed. And we also have layers of progressive giving at certain stages. And so that allows us to acknowledge that for some members of our giving circle, $1,000 is an enormous amount. It's a huge percentage of what they have available. And for some, that's just a small portion of what they can provide to the collective. And so that is a start at holding each other accountable in our friendships and in our broader community for what we're able to give. In terms of, you know, the importance of starting Radfund among this particular group of people that came together, there are about 13 of us that are part of the initial organizing group. And for all of us, we are, I think there may only be, you know, potentially one or two of us who are actually of the community that we live in. So for us, most of us live in the New York area, almost all of us live in Brooklyn. We understand that Brooklyn is a rapidly gentrifying area. And so what would it look like for us to say, we want to be accountable through this process of engaging as a giving circle with organizations that are directly serving the community? And I don't mean accountable necessarily in terms of, you know, we're not sitting in meetings with folks from these other organizations, but what we are doing is saying out loud that we recognize the power and privilege that comes with the wealth and with the income that we have. And we're committed to trying to break down the barriers between our communities through the giving process. And I'll say that, you know, again, hearkening back to some of what was said in the previous panel, that really at base, and this was something that Ju and Kang said, that she's a big believer in organization and getting organized, connecting with people, struggling together, challenging each other, being transparent with your friends about how much money you have is hugely powerful. And these are things that now bind us together and have created a sense of political home in our friendships, where before we were a group of largely, you know, radical progressives, yes, but not in all of our spaces. And Radfund has afforded us an opportunity to become more political with our friends.
Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. I think for us in Birmingham, so I'm a member of the Birmingham Change Fund, which was founded in 2004 with a mission of impacting and making Birmingham the best city for African Americans. We focus on education, healthcare, and economics, believing that those are the things that can really move our city forward. And with that, Birmingham Change Fund is also one of the 2 founding circles of the Community Investment Network. I will say that when I think of that radical vision of social justice, the beauty of being a giving is that it allows you really to own the solution to the problem. We believe that community knows what community needs. And so a lot of times giving circles are able to really hear from the community. They're a part of the community. They listen and lead with the community instead of having a top-down approach. And also because they're so close to the community, they understand how to, I believe at times, connect resources to the right organizations, as well as allowing organizations that are often overlooked to receive funding for their work. And that's the beauty of being a part of a collective giving group, because you can help usher in solutions to those problems that really are plaguing your community, that keep us from having this just society, that keep us from ensuring that everyone is receiving a quality education or able to sleep peacefully at night, whatever the issues in your community may be. So the power is that you can be a problem solver as through your funding, but beyond that, also even with recognizing how you can work alongside the other community organizations that are doing good work, but that are just not even being recognized because they're constantly under-resourced and not being equipped with the capacity that they need to further the good work that they're doing.
Thanks, you all. It's great to hear about your giving circles. So giving projects. So I work at the Giving Project Network, and giving projects are not giving circles. They're distinct kind of model. So I'll talk a little bit about that model and how it connects to the visions that we all laid out earlier. So Giving Project, they're all housed at social justice funds. So funds and foundations that are essentially intermediaries within the philanthropic and organizing field that are specific kinds of institutions. So we have 10 funds in our network that use the Giving Project model. And a Giving Project is a 6-month program where usually about 20 people across race and across class identities come together in a highly facilitated process where they are gaining skills in fundraising and grant making. They're actually raising the money from their communities with direct fundraising asks. And the model really encourages people to do those not through a party or through online GoFundMes or things like that, but really to do one-on-one direct asks to people that they have real relationships with. So they actually raise the money. Usually Giving Projects raise about $100,000. Some have raised $400 in 6 months. And through that process, they do a grant cycle and actually grant the money out to community organizing groups. Giving Projects are all focused on community organizing as a vehicle for social change. And so all of the funding goes to community organizing aligned with our values around racial justice. And so we prioritize, every fund has their own distinct criteria, but all of them kind of prioritize groups that are led by people who are most directly impacted by an issue and really lifting up the leadership of Black, Indigenous, and people of color where they're most affected by different issues in that community. The Giving Project model, and I think there's a lot of overlap with social justice giving circles too, advance the vision toward liberation and toward movements for liberation that are well-resourced, is by really preparing participants to recognize how we've all experienced the connection between money, race, class, and all of these different dynamics, and kind of unpacking those pieces. in giving projects, there are group sessions, there's coaching sessions, there's the individual practice that they do actually in the fundraising. And so there's a lot of different components. There's political education, there's all these different components of the program, but all of it really is about having a transformative relationship, a transformative experience of fundraising and of relationships. And fundamentally, I think it's really about disconnecting our sense of worth as human beings with the amount of money or resources that we have access to, and being part of a collective that is trying to be part of the solution and partnering with organizations and groups that are doing that work. And really about building power toward, we collectively have the power to move resources to make that change happen. I think the other big thing kind of at a personal level for folks that go through giving projects is really confronting the shame of that people have across different class experiences of shame for not having enough money, shame for inheriting a lot of money, shame for making money in a system that is inherently exploitative, and really being able to move toward recognizing the reality of the system that we live in and what it looks like for us to take steps together to change that.
Thank you all so much. There's so much there, and everything that you guys have said is just making me think. I think obviously, giving is a component of like the justice, politics, giving circles, and we talked a little bit about that. But I feel like there's so much that you guys have kind of talked about in your answers that are about relationships, experiences with each other, relationships with community, organization, organizing. And then I know, Sarah, you also mentioned political homes as well. And I guess I wanted to kind of just ask you about, the work that these collectives do. That's kind of a little bit what the formation of the organizing and the formation of the Giving Circle has kind of allowed you to do beyond giving. And I know I'll ask all of you to share, but I'll start with Marsha, because I know that you have, a very specific example relating to the incredible work that the Birmingham Change Fund has led to in local civic engagement. And then why doesn't Sarah and Sian, you can follow, and then we'll let Mario kind of chime in on this one as well.
So earlier I mentioned that the Birmingham Change Fund focuses on 3 areas, and they are healthcare, education, and economics. And those were our founding principles in 2004, founding focus areas. In 2009, we decided we wanted to be a little more strategic about our grant making and what we were doing in our community. And so we narrowed our focus to education. And so we went on this journey for over a year to really understand the dynamics of the Birmingham City school system. So we were able to connect with everyone from teachers, students, retired librarians, parents, the school superintendent, the mayor. We wanted to make sure we had a holistic understanding of what was going on with our students in our community to figure out how we could be a part of the solution to make sure that they were receiving a quality education. During that process, we actually had a chance to visit schools. And so one of our members remembers going to the school and having an experience that was a little unnerving because of just the quality of the school that he was in. And so after that experience, he, as a member, as an individual person, said, gosh, I think that I can really impact our system by running to be elected on our school board. And one of the leaders of that grant cycle, who was really instrumental in pulling together a number of the folks we were able to connect with and interview with and to engage with, had already run for school board and he lost. But the next time around, both of them were able to run and they were elected. The beauty of that is that one of them went on to become the president of the school board. And even from there, 4 years ago, he was elected mayor of the city of Birmingham. He's the youngest mayor in, I believe, over 100 years here in the city. I think that the thing to be mindful of is that giving circles, because you were talking about you're in the community, you're of the community, you're being community informed and led. They truly are a tremendous way for you to understand the needs and to see where you as an individual or as a collective group can really be a part of the problem and use your talents to serve beyond just your giving your dollars. It's really about how can you give your whole self to solve this problem that's in our community. And you also know that you're in fellowship with like-minded people. So the mayor of the city of Birmingham, his chief of staff is one of our Giving Circle members. And so that's tremendous, because you know that when we talk, Sarah mentioned something about that accountability earlier, there's nothing more powerful than knowing that you have the heart of the community, leading your city, trying to make things better for your community. And it really does help you stay more engaged, as well as understanding exactly who you have serving and working for the community.
Thanks so much, Marcia. I just want to say it's so inspiring to hear about the journey of your fund, because you said from 2004 to 2009, you all were a little bit more broadly defined. And then in your 5th year, or you're coming up on your 6th year, you tried to zero in a little bit more. And that's where Radfund is right now. We started in 2015. We're in our 6th year. And sure enough, this is really a moment where we're taking stock of what we've done and trying to think about how to be continually more strategic as we move forward. And earlier in the panel, I said that we support organizing. And for us in particular, that means challenging structural inequality and looking for organizations that actively work to fight racial and economic justice. Since in the last 5 years, we've given about $200,000, $220,000 to 14 different community organizations. And one key piece of the way that we give is that we don't require any reporting. We're not asking these groups to report back to us. We are saying that we've had conversations on the front end. We respect that it takes a lot of money and time to engage with funders and with people that are giving. And we want to build a relationship where we're saying we're trusting these organizations to carry out the same kind of work that we initially saw when we were looking for folks to actually be in community with, to give to. And so, that is one real core tenet of our work. We also recognize that we need to be building a political home for ourselves in our friendships. And I mentioned this a little bit before as well. We have so many different sides of ourselves, right? We show up at work in one way, we show up in our friendships in another way, we show up with family, maybe you show up with your neighbor in a different way. And so what Radfund has done to kind of move towards that vision of collective liberation and accountability is to take a group of friends who love going out dancing with each other. A lot of us met on dance floors, and turning something that could be very, just oriented towards partying and oriented towards things that are, less serious. Not that having fun isn't a serious matter. We should all be focused on trying to have fun and bring joy to ourselves, but to intentionally inject conversation about class and about privilege and about gentrification into these relationships where we were already generally political people, but not intentional in our politic with each other, and not intentional in particular in our class politic with each other. And so, the way that Radfund has evolved, we have been dedicated to that political education with each other. And most recently during COVID, we also opened that up for our broader community. We held a webinar about giving during COVID, recognizing that there was a huge need. And it was a lot of friends who weren't sure what to do. They felt sort of powerless in their individuality. And we were able to say, we've done some real work on the front end to engage with community in Brooklyn and across New York, across all the I don't know if we fund anyone in Staten Island, but across most of the boroughs, to help direct community to how they could feel like they were making a contribution.
All right, so I'll jump in my 4-year-old is like banging on the door. So if you hear anything in the background, that's what that is. I did want to just piggyback on the thing around kind of the dates that Marcia and Sarah were both mentioning. The Giving Project model was developed in 2010 at the Social Justice Fund Northwest in Seattle. And at the time, that fund, Social Justice Fund, had been around for, I think, since the 70s, and their donor base was starting to age, and they were really after the 2008 recession, we're really in this moment of trying to figure out what does social justice philanthropy look like in this year. And so they came up with this program, which was kind of just putting together all these, let's throw some political education, participatory grant making, grassroots fundraising, just threw together a bunch of different things. And sorry, hold on one second.
This is just the reality of working these days.
Thanks. Sorry. So they developed the Giving Project model kind of out of necessity of how do we bring in more younger donors, more donors of color, more people kind of aligned with social justice movements into actually this role of being a donor. And then in 2014, 2015, they started really sharing that model out with other social justice funds around the country. But it does seem significant to notice, I think for me, what I was really drawn to about the Giving Project model is this idea of being an alternative to mainstream models of philanthropy. And having come out of nonprofit organizing at the national level for the last 10 or so years, and seeing in some ways the difficulties of a lot of organizations to respond to moments like Ferguson, and even this past the uprising after George Floyd was murdered, the need for building strong organization, I think, going back to that theme, and really seeing building organization that is thinking about resourcing and thinking about mobilizing resources, not just as oh, you have a nonprofit, so you have to write some grants, but actually bringing that into the organizing strategy. So for the Giving Project, we tend to have a really diverse mix of people, including people that work at grassroots organizations, including high net wealth individuals, including working class folks that are part of different communities. And really through this experience, participants of Giving Projects, members of Giving Projects, have been able to build their own leadership, to move into positions of leadership in their organizations, into being on a board of a local foundation, and into being kind of this donor organizer or resource mobilizer in different parts of their lives, wherever that makes sense. And I think that one of the things for me that's really critical about the model and about kind of where this fits in the field of social justice is really that the model of philanthropy where wealth that has been made out of profits and that have been extracting from labor that's been exploited, from natural resources that have been exploited, huge amounts of wealth that have been generated from the capitalist economy, and the exploitation that's built into that, then being kind of given back in bits and pieces to different pieces, which means, which is through a mechanism of avoiding taxation, maintaining private control over those resources. And so fundamentally, I think this is about how do we shift our relationship collectively to money so that we can make bigger demands around redistribution of wealth, and not about how do we make capitalism nicer or make it a little less brutal or a little less violent, but actually how do we change the system. And I see Giving Projects as kind of a step in that direction of people across class being able to kind of look at the class system and be able to shift their relationship to it, and really be able to center our own humanity and our collective liberation, right? Because and I think a lot of the funds in our network use the tagline of change, not charity, where this isn't about, you get to exploit and make huge amounts of money and then give back a few pennies and crumbs here and there, but it's really that shouldn't be able to happen in the first place. So yeah, I think I'll just say one of the things that I really love about our network and the people who are doing giving projects, because we facilitate a learning community of the 10 funds and all the people kind of leadership and facilitators that are involved in those funds in giving projects. And it's just the way that people are able, I'm so blown away all the time at how loving and practical folks are from doing this, from being able to facilitate these spaces, like being able to think about everything from, okay, how is this participant going to get childcare? How do we make sure they get a hotspot so that they can get on the Zoom meeting? How do we, really take care of people, send them a reimburse if they need to pay for dinner, because they're going to be in this meeting, everything to, just really being able to think of the whole scope of how do we practice social justice values and center Black liberation, center decolonization in every little thing that we do. And how do we have a community in our network? We have a community to really hold each other and ourselves accountable to those in like the smallest and the biggest ways. So I think that's, just the power of that collectivity at all the different levels, right? Like, so, yeah.
Yeah. And I have a 4-month-old, and I have a question of whether he'll grow up to love us. And so there's a part of me that's like, oh, I really hope that my child still knocks on the door when he's 4 or 5 and still wants our attention, because my greatest fear is that he won't at some point. Marsha, I did want to say, so just so you know, the story you told has been an inspiration for a long time in my work, equally because I love the story and equally because I love Ed Fields, who is the chief of staff. And as an aside, when we were starting a nonprofit called the New American Leaders Project, which trains first and second generation immigrants to run for office, I used to do this exercise, which was effective, but ultimately very tragic, where we would go into audiences of people of color, and we would ask, how many of you are unhappy with your elected officials? And they would all raise their hand. Then we would ask, how many of you know someone who in your family or your community would make for a better elected official? And everyone raised their hand, and I would be like, great, you all are 2 out of 2. We have one last question. How many of you have asked that person that you just thought about that would make for a great elected leader to just consider running for office? A question with no cost, and it would be silent, right? And to imagine that your giving circle was a place that actively sought to see each other's leadership in the room, but then also make asks of themselves, right? Like for the mayor of Birmingham to then ask Ed to serve in public service. And then Ed answering that call is just a powerful story. And so I'm grateful for Sian for that. What I wanted to share kind of just builds off everything. So I'm not part of a giving circle myself. I'm part of this social justice giving circle project, but also building out at Justice Funders a project around supporting both community foundations and giving circles to become political homes, civic homes in any way that we can. For both Justice Funders and Giving Side, we hold dear a particular truth that while resources certainly play a powerful role in our movements, again, what breathes life and power into them has always been the vibrant, determined, and collective participation of individuals in civic and political life. More specifically, our progression and transformation along our respective civic and political journeys. And key to all of this are the political homes which Priscilla on our last webinar so beautifully and personally and powerfully described. And I hope if you all haven't seen it that you do. Political homes are the places where both kind of possibility and power emanate for our social movements. Just to give my own example, for me, my political home in New York was an organization called CAV. Its mission was to build grassroots power across diverse and working class Asian immigrant and refugee communities. But when the Iraq War happened, when Hurricane Katrina happened, when the RNC came to New York, our offices were packed, which doesn't make sense, again, if you think about our mission statement, but it made sense if you understood that CAV was a political home for many Asian Americans throughout New York City, such that when major events happen in the world, we knew exactly where to go to find a place to better understand what was happening, what it meant, and how we might be able to respond both individually and collectively. Our analysis right now is that we believe giving circles find themselves at this fork in the road. In one direction is the pull and the support of big philanthropy, of extractive wealth, a direction that kind of attracts attention itself using the allure of the proximity to wealth and influence, and a direction that pushes giving circles to formalize above everything else the monetary part of giving circles, and almost a move towards not talking about politics and political work and running for office, for example. The other direction are the ones that have been shared here, which is to move towards a political home, places that are great at giving, but that are in relationships with social justice movements that in themselves to consider our whole set of talents that we can bring to movements and the whole set of needs that movements and history is asking of us. And places that express that kind of love you hope to find in homes, that challenging type of love that congratulates you for graduating kindergarten, but doesn't just end there, but is then focused on getting you ready for first grade. That type of love that is explicitly challenging, and that might see possibilities in you and your participation that you might not alone see in yourself. And to be clear, in that other direction, the one we worry about, I think big philanthropy has a vested interest in the spread of a philanthropic culture, because if you think of playing fields, philanthropy is one that simply by access to more wealth, wealthy individuals can dominate from the very start. If doing good is equated with the amount of money that you're giving, then clearly kind of the biggest philanthropies are those with the most wealth, have the most resources to do the most good. And the centering of money in our relationships to movement can oftentimes obscure what might be a more important question. Are they a good person? How is that, to Shan's point, how is that money accumulated? Why in a world with enough, some have too much and others have nothing? And it's a culture that's, if we think about it over the past 30, 40 years, that has unfortunately inserted a level of scarcity, competition, and individualism into social movements and the nonprofit sector. And so in the framework that we're trying to build out around giving circles in political homes, we're asking how our giving circles, as in all these examples, are not ceilings to the ways we participate and imagine what our worth and value is to movements, but are springboards that propel us to consider all the ways that we could contribute collectively.
Mario, so beautifully said. Thank you for inviting us to think about all of this. We are getting ready to transition to breakout groups to hear your reflections about all of this. I want to thank all of the panelists, so you'll get to spend a little bit more time with them in the breakout groups, as well as some other members of the Social Justice Giving Circle project, but invite you all to think deeper about your relationships to each other through giving circles and through giving into your communities and what your vision of social justice is. So I'll turn it over to Sara to lead us over the transition from one room to another.
Thank you, LiJia. What an amazing discussion and conversation. Thank you to all the panelists. And something that my friends at Latino Community Foundation always said, we are the leaders that we were waiting for. Each of us have the power to make change. Each of us, as part of Giving Circles, are philanthropists, and we are here to lead and to, really, walk the walk and take action. So thank you for the discussion today. We would love to invite you to join the discussion. So the chat, you can see the link in the chat. Just jump on that Zoom link. Join us, spend another few minutes with the amazing panelists. We'll see you there. Thank you. For those of you that have not jumped on the new Zoom, the link is in the chat and you will get directed to a breakout room. Okay, we're seeing everybody moving along there. Thank you, everyone.